First, create a new repository. In an empty folder in VS Code, take this code and paste it into the terminal and run it. This will set up GitHub. Then in the terminal, type in the command npm init playwright at latest to install Playwright. Let it run. Select JavaScript. Press enter, enter, and enter to install the correct things. Let it install. And once it's finished, push all of these to GitHub. Looking at all the files we just installed, the github/workflows folder has the playwright.yml file, which controls GitHub Actions. You see, this is the name, and then every time you push to the main branch or pull to the main branch, then it runs this job, which essentially installs all of the things it needs and then runs the tests, and then it creates a report. The node modules you don't have to worry about, that's just installed files. The tests folder has the test files where you make the Playwright tests. The gitignore file tells GitHub which folders to ignore, folders or files. The packagelock.json and package.json you can ignore. The playwright.config.js are where some settings are for Playwright that we can change, and the README is from GitHub. Once we have Playwright installed, if you want to run the tests in the test folder, run the command npx playwright test. Once it's finished, we will see the report from it, and if we want to see the HTML report, we can type in this command, which will open a new tab and show us we've passed all the tests. I created a new test that fails on purpose to show that when you run the tests and a test fails, it'll pop up here. And once the test is over, it'll open the HTML report and you can see where in the test it failed. Pushing that change I made earlier, when I go to GitHub, you can see we've got all the installed files. We can see that it's running here, but if we go to the Actions tab and then we click here, we can see the added failure example push we just did. And then if we click on here, we can see that it's currently going through the process of the job. It runs the tests, and it finished. So we can see the X mark because we have that test failed. That fails on purpose. If we come down here, you can click on this. It'll download a report, and you can unzip it, but if you open it, you'll see the report that we were able to see earlier. And you can compare that to the earlier push where we didn't have that test failed. You'll see the green check mark. And finally, for some important things you might want to change in your setup, currently in the YML file we can see that the GitHub Actions only runs on push or pull requests to main, but there are two good things you might want to add. First is a schedule event, which you use with cron, which basically just means it'll run the GitHub Actions at a certain time. There are lots of guides online for how to use cron, but for example, this is how you'd have it run at noon every day. And then also there's a thing called a workflow dispatch, which essentially just allows you to run the GitHub Actions manually from GitHub without having to do a push or pull request or on a schedule, which can be good for testing. And then also in the we might want to look at the config file. So there's a lot of you don't really need to mess with most of this, but a few things I changed around when I was working with it was you can add reporters, which is basically like that GitHub report or the HTML report that we could open. There's more of them that you can look up and add. And then also we can add a screenshot functionality when a test fails, which we do with here in this use section. We do use on only on failure, and this allows us to see uh, the test will take a screenshot of the screen once they fail, and that can also help with debugging. So you're going to want to push that to GitHub. And then we can go to back to GitHub. We can see that this is now running. And then if we click on the Playwright tests thing, you can now see this workflow has a workflow dispatch event trigger. This is what you can manually run the workflow. It'll do those tests again. So that can be good for debugging. Also, there's this stuff down here is these are all the browsers that it runs on. If you notice the tests run the same tests on different browsers, you can remove or add more of the ones that they have here, depending on how many browsers you want, including mobile devices. Also, here's what the screenshot looks like. It's currently blank because I didn't load a website, but if you actually had a website loaded, it would show you what it saw when it failed.